Okay, thank you very much for that kind introduction. You will notice that that is probably an example of flattered communion because we always thank people for an introduction that is kind that we frankly wrote ourselves. So that's something I've always wondered, but it's something you have to say anyway. Yeah. Thank you very much, anyway. I realized that I stand between you and lunch. My only promise is that I won't put you to sleep before lunch, I hope so. And I've been told by my students and other participants in conferences that I speak like a train, so it shouldn't be a problem for me to catch up. So I'm the crazy but not so rich Asian. Today I would like to share with you a topic that is very close to my heart because for once it tries to marry the two disciplines that I've been engaged in working on, one on applied linguistics and of course the other on teacher education. So the title of my talk is Preparing ELT Professionals for the 21st Century, a Transformative Model. I will begin with some of the thoughts that we have and are in the process of implementing since I took over as Dean of Teacher Education on the 1st of July. And I will end with a more specific focus on language teacher education and how we do that in Singapore. To recap all of that, I will show you a video that covers a summary of what I've been talking about today. So what is so different about the 21st century? The late Professor Stephen Hawking had this to say, that the 21st century will be a century of complexity, and I think that you and I agree that all sorts of, in the fourth industrial revolution as we are called, there are so many unpredictable creations and innovations that have come our way, part of which has been covered by my esteemed speaker, Professor Lawrence Anthony, about even artificial intelligence, and how that's really going to rock our world. But, interestingly, several centuries ago, Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu has this to say, which is very much in resonance with what the late Professor Stephen Hawking had to say, which is everything is connected and everything relates to each other. Couldn't find a picture of him, so we had to have a schematic representation of him. So what is it about this connectivity in the fourth industrial revolution? We're really looking at globalization, I would like to say ultra-globalization, the extreme connectivity caused by the proliferation of the internet in every aspect of our lives. And please feel free to check your WhatsApp and social media. I know that it's all part of learning in the digital age, and I will not feel at all insulted. Ultra-urbanization, which links us from one part of the world remotely to another part of the world. What this really means is that in the past, we could just say that if something happens in one part of the world, we are completely almost protected from it. But today we know that if a big country like the US, China, Russia, India, okay, if they sneeze, the rest of the world catches a cold because we are extremely connected. And what does this mean for us as we prepare teachers? In 2018, we had a new director of NIE that took over as well, and together we refreshed our vision and mission in line with keeping with what we need to do in the 21st century for teacher education. So we refresh our vision as an institute of distinction leading the future of education. And our mission will be to inspire learning, transform teaching, and advance research. So these, if you were to look at any strategic visions and missions of universities around the world, are all aspirational and they pretty much say the same thing. The intangible effects of and connectivity between learning and teaching, and the need to have an empirical evidence base to support the growth in teaching and learning. So the main tagline that I came up with was future-ready teachers for future-ready learners. Really, this is a vision for teacher education that we want to think about in the 21st century, where you have learners or student teachers who are creators of knowledge, facilitators of learning, shapers of character, architects of the learning environment, and leaders of educational change, not merely followers. So with this vision in mind then, we also designed the NIE Education for Life. This is a deliberate pun on the word for. It could be for life, which is the preposition, or for lives. What are these 4 lives? We talk about a lifelong pathway, which is truly multiple pathways across the continuum of teachers' career-long development. It is no longer enough to prepare teachers at pre-service and think that they will be ready throughout their career. We all know that teachers themselves must demonstrate that they are lifelong learners, able to upgrade themselves professionally, academically, holistically throughout their career lifespan. What do we mean by life-wide perspective? It is about providing multiple, global, local, digital, and multimodal literacies for our student teachers and professional teachers. Next, life deep. What does it mean when you prepare teachers to have a life deep education? In terms of teacher education and professional development, it is about deepening the professional expertise of a teacher that we all believe begins even before pre-service, continues during pre-service, and onward as the teacher journeys from novice teacher to experienced teacher and professional teacher. Finally, life-wise education is about constantly reiterating the professional ethos and values of the teacher from the minute they step into teaching. Because we know that ultimately, teaching, and we hope that the endeavor of teacher education cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence, because teaching is a very human, relational endeavor. So hopefully I've got us jobs even for life, for lives and for life. Okay, and this is truly, you can hear from the passion with which I speak, that this is something I truly feel, that in order, really teaching is very much a human relational endeavor, and we have to stick to that and realize that this is true. The next thing I'd like to talk about is to underpin something that I've only seen in one other country, or jurisdiction as they may call it, and that is Finland. Since the founding of Singapore, we are a very young country, founded only about 53, almost 54 years ago, if you talk about 2019. Teachers have been likened to be nation builders. This is a very tall calling, a very high calling, and a very tall order, that's what I mean. Teachers as nation builders. Today, when I drive into campus, and if I happen to be behind a bus, I might see a sign that says, "Teachers, shaping the future of our nation, one student at a time." This is an advertorial which is done by the Ministry of Education. It is to signpost the messaging that since Singapore gained full independence as a nation city-state in 1965 to the present, the message has been clear that the role of teachers is extremely important because it is likened to that of nation builders. So a little bit of context about Singapore and the great emphasis on education, updated sometime in 2017. The projected expenditure is next only to defense. We spend about 12.9 billion Singapore dollars, or USD, about $10 billion on education. Our literacy rate is high at about 97.2%, and our GDP per capita is about 55 USD, making us one of the richest countries in Asia. However, the important thing that I'd like to say from the very start when I present at any platform is that Singapore is a very small country. In fact, it is almost an anomaly because we are a city, nation, country, state, which is very rare. I think you cannot find a country that is at the same time a city, a nation, and as well as a whole country. So if you go to the States and they ask you to fill in the state, you know, which state you come from, what is the capital of your state, I really have a problem because for me everything just says Singapore. A very small system of only 366 schools and about 33 to 34,000 education officers or teachers in the system. So I always underscore what I say by telling you that it is a very, very small country and a very small context. And this is something you have to bear in mind, even as I'm passionately sharing about what we do, because it is a very small system. So to start with, you need to ensure that the best and the brightest enter into the profession. And how do we do this? The top 30% of each of our cohort is selected into teaching. And in fact, we have a further preening off of the top 15% for what we call the Premier Teaching Scholars Program. Now, it is not, these people are shortlisted for the interview, but if you look at the selection interview, we are not afraid to reject very bright applicants if they don't demonstrate the aptitude and attitude that we're looking for in teachers. And the selection interview is really about 1 in 8 success rate. Our pre-service education is completely paid for, tuition fees are paid for. Everyone who comes in signs a bond with the Ministry of Education where they agree to serve for a certain number of years upon graduation in exchange for the tuition fees that are being paid for, as well as quite a handsome monthly stipend that they're given even whilst undergoing pre-service teacher education. The salaries are considered to be very competitive, but there again there is a benchmark. Competitive in relation to beginning accountants and engineers. So a beginning accountant, engineer, and a beginning teacher earn around the same amount of money. So we need to make teaching an attractive profession within the civil service. So in line with talking about life-wise values, our underpinning philosophy of teacher education is really about values, values, and values. And you will see a 3-pronged set of values intertwined in the central pillar, which is meant to be a schematic representation of the DNA model. So what do we mean by the attributes of the 21st century teaching professional? We always tell our student teachers that if there is a first, second, and third thing that they've learned from us at the NIE that prepares all teachers for schools at the pre-service level, it has to be about values, values, and values. The first value paradigm then is about learner-centeredness, that at the heart of everything that we do is the learner seated right in the center of the classroom. Whether we are teaching, doing research, or to try to enable engaged learners, or trying to come up with transformative means to engage our learners, whether it be through technology or all sorts of innovative pedagogies, truly speaking, it is the learner and the learner's learning that should concern us as teacher educators and as teachers. And underpinning that learner-centeredness is the belief that all students can learn. And it is the job of us teachers to be able to bring out and unleash that potential in each and every learner seated in the center of our classroom. And we must never lose sight of that. Second value paradigm is the emphasis on a strong sense of teacher identity. Because international research on teacher education has shown that teachers who have a very strong sense of identity or pride about being teachers are likely to A, stay longer in the profession, and B, contribute back to the profession of growing the fraternity of teachers. And that brings me very nicely to value paradigm number 3, which is to serve the community and the profession of teachers. Because teaching, unlike any other profession, is about growing the next generation of teachers. That when we have become professional teachers, we do not just sit on our laurels, but we have a job, which is to grow the next level of teachers so that they can even be better than we ourselves are as teachers. So this becomes the underpinning philosophy and the teaching ethos and professionalism of our teacher education model. It is very much built on values. As you know, we keep having to emphasize this because from the outside looking in, Singapore is all about credentials, credentialing and wanting to do well in internationally benchmarked tests, etc., etc. But if you come into Singapore, and even if you just go on the landing website of the Ministry of Education, you will realize that test scores we are completely quiet about test scores. In fact, we are trying to move away, and the new Minister for Education, Minister Ong Ye Kung, has just announced this, that we want to recalibrate the overemphasis on assessment in order to bring out the joy of learning in our students. And by doing this, we really have to move away from the typical traditional assessment to really formative assessment that helps our student teachers, or rather our students in schools as well, to grow. I say student teachers because I've had to model this straight away in my first semester. I have had to make sure that my faculty come on board and do not over-assess the student teachers. So we've mandated that they have to cut down the number of accessible components that they have for each individual component. And secondly, that out of each of these accessible components, which we recommend to be at only about 2 or 3, there must be one that is definitely nothing to do with paper and pencil exams or assignments. It has to be completely alternative. So the rhetoric inside of Singapore is really very much a move towards overemphasis on assessment to bringing out the joy of learning and the authenticity of the learning environment. And this is very much in keeping with what our students need to function in a 21st century global workplace and society. And wrapped around the three-pronged set of values would be what we have scoured from the literature to be 21st century skills and knowledge that we think our student teachers will need to bring about the learning and the quality of teaching that is needed in their classrooms for the future. But obviously we know that this must be a live document because all of these skills and even the knowledge bases have to change as we move each and every day, sometimes moment by moment. So I've come up with this wheel of future-ready teachers. And what do we mean by this? Because it has to move from rhetoric to implementation. So I've rationalized our model in terms of teacher professionalism, provision of rigorous programs, innovative pedagogies, providing multiple perspectives, and strong professional practice. You can see that it links very much back to the 4 lives model that I was talking about. Now what I've done is to give you a summary of some of the things that we do, but I will really be going in depth to demonstrate each and every one of these elements. But this is just a quick summary slide, if you like, or what they call a tablecloth presentation, where everything that I want to present is right here, but I will go into details of each and every one of this in a little while. So I'm going to talk to you about some of these components to bring about future-ready learning for our teachers. First of all, building a strong sense of teacher professionalism. We believe that values can be taught as well as caught. So we are quite deliberate in our values education. And here you will see our initial articulation of the values-based education components in our teacher education program. For a start, we have a compulsory module known as Character and Citizenship Education, which allows our student teachers to understand citizenship and to nurture their professional commitment to the profession. Now, this is important because when they go out to become professional teachers in schools, they do have to teach the CCE module. Next, we have a compulsory service learning project which every single student teacher engages in, known as Group Endeavors in Service Learning. And the motto here is learning to serve, serving to learn. So student teachers in groups of about 16 to 20, depending on cohort size, but we try not to have more than groups of 20, enact a community involvement project of their choice. And what they need to do is to spend at least 20 hours with the community and to produce a hard copy deliverable. Hard copy meaning a deliverable that could be even online, it doesn't matter. So I'll give you a concrete example. As a faculty member, I have led this in the pilot phase. So my students wanted to work with a society known as the Retinitis Pigmentosa Society. This refers to a debilitating eye disease that affects about 1% of Singapore's population, where central vision is completely blurred and what is left behind is peripheral vision. And what my student teachers did was to raise 5,500 Singapore dollars to purchase assistive computer technology that can enlarge print up to 60 times for sufferers of this disease. They can rent out the machine and they can read painstakingly, letter by letter, because it enlarges the letter. And remember, sufferers of the disease have peripheral vision left to see the enlarged letters. Next, they also produce a pamphlet to raise public awareness about the 1% of Singaporeans who suffer from this disease. And they worked with ophthalmologists on this. So this is to give you a very concrete example. To date, I have about 25,000 student teachers who have undergone the Group Endeavors and Service Learning project. When they go out to schools, they do have to lead values in action community projects in schools. So we call this pedagogy experiential learning, where our student teachers learn by doing it themselves. Next, we also introduce a Singapore Kaleidoscope module, which allows our student teachers to appreciate the ethnic and cultural heritage of Singapore. And it is completely not assessed via traditional means. Instead, after they've gone around appreciating the culture and ethnicity and heritage of Singapore, they are asked to produce an artifact to showcase what they've appreciated about Singapore. And we call this appreciative inquiry. It is very much in the literature as well. In fact, I hold an exhibition every year at National Day, and some of the products are so beautiful that I've asked our Corporate Communications Office to consider using them as corporate gifts, of course seeking the permission from the student teachers themselves. And we have something else called the Meranti Project. The Meranti Project gets its name from a very tall tree which produces very hard and resilient wood. Those of you who can speak Malay will understand this. Meranti refers to a tree that has very resilient and hard wood. And we want to demonstrate to our student teachers that as teachers of the future, you do need to be extremely resilient and to weather any storm that can come your way. And what is this Meranti Project? They have a 2-day personal and professional development project, which is externally facilitated but carefully selected by all of us. And what happens is that they dig deep into their reasons for joining teaching, because I think it does play a part that you do need to constantly reflect on what motivated you, first of all, to join teaching. And they also engage in personal and professional conversations with teachers in schools and even at-risk students in classrooms who come to our student teachers at the pre-service phase and who literally, I've seen and witnessed this for myself, question my student teachers and say something like, school is boring, how can you make a difference for me? I don't feel like going to school. And because it is not at all staged and it's a very safe environment for both the at-risk students as well as our student teachers, very real professional exchanges and deep conversations do take place during this project. Now, on the extreme right, I will talk about this a little while. It is known as our digital or electronic portfolio, known as the PPI, or Professional Practice and Inquiry. We frankly studied this first in Stanford University, and we found that it was important for us to scale this up, even though my pre-service program is much larger than Stanford's. We have about, and this is at our low, 1,500 student teachers every single year. They have about a cohort size of about 300, max 600. But we scaled this up across the program systematically, starting from 2010 all the way to the present. And it is a digital platform where I'll be talking about this. Students can integrate and aggregate their learning journeys in an electronic portfolio, which will then accompany them to be the beginnings of their professional teaching portfolio when they leave our portals. So this is really to talk a bit more about the electronic portfolio. At the pre-service phase, it is really a learning portfolio where they load artifacts of what they've learned in terms of delivering on the values, skills, and knowledge model that I talked to you about. But at the final practicum phase, or the clinical practice phase, it becomes a showcasing portfolio of what they have learned. And they need to demonstrate this to their cooperating mentor teachers in schools. So they will showcase their learning journey in pre-service to their practicum mentor teachers. Finally, when they are beginning teachers, it will accompany them because we have worked relentlessly to find the correct platform that can be ported from pre-service all the way to in-service. It is the beginning of their professional teaching portfolio that can accompany them throughout their milestone career points, even for milestone promotional prospects, where they can just look at this digital resource and look at how their learning journeys began at pre-service when they articulated their somewhat naive and fresh, innocent perspectives about teaching and their own teaching philosophy at the start, and compare it over the years. Now, this portfolio is very much tied to our enhanced practicum model and enhanced mentorship model, where in OISE, Ontario Institute of Studies in Education, University of Toronto, we saw this as professional learning inquiry seminars. But when we wanted to implement it in our Singapore system, the teachers in schools felt uncomfortable with the word seminars. So we changed it to the word conversations. FC stands for focused conversations. It was basically a way of telling the teachers in school that do what you're doing, it's just that we're giving it a lot more structure. So in the final practicum, which it spans over 10 weeks, the first focused conversation is really to share with the cooperating teacher about what they've learned so far at pre-service. In weeks 3 to 6, the focused conversations will be about looking at particular areas of concern and issues as our student teachers walk through their final practicum journey. But interestingly, in Focus Conversation 4, which takes place at the end of the final clinical practice or practicum, it is really about their learning in school in terms of how it has helped them to build their graduate teacher competencies. So this is very deliberate, and you can see how the practicum and the digital portfolio is very much talking about and relating to each other all the time. This is completely new. The Singapore teaching practice is introduced to my student teachers in a course known as Pedagogical Practices. This course teaches our student teachers the theoretical what, why, and how of teaching even before they enter the clinical practice in schools. And the Singapore teaching practice is meant to document effective learning and teaching techniques in our Singapore schools, which have been proven to be effective over the years, but it is very much underpinned by the Singapore curriculum philosophy. And it is jointly developed by the Ministry of Education with experts from the National Institute of Education. And aptly, it is therefore taking the shape of our national flower, which is the orchid. So what you see right in the center of the orchid is pedagogical practice, and you have knowledge bases on the petals. What is important for me to point out is that each of these knowledge bases are definitely influenced by international research. For example, motivating learners and learning is of course informed by an international theory of practice such as self-determination theory. However, when it comes to enactment in the local schools, it is important to marry what international research tells us with what our faculty members have been doing in schools in terms of looking at the way that our students learn, the profile of our learners in schools. So this really marries an evidence base for teacher education and practice, on top of which it is meant to serve as a common language from pre-service all the way to the practicum component, because the assessment of practicum form follows each of these knowledge bases and is further divided into 24 teaching areas. So the language that is used is common from pre-service all the way to the practicum and when they go out to schools to teach. So you can surf the website, just Google Singapore Teaching Practice, and you will find some of the main tenets in there on the Ministry of Education's website. In order for us to move in tandem in terms of trying to change the way that our faculty has been teaching traditionally, we needed to transform our physical infrastructure. So the philosophy would be teachers are facilitators of learning. So one way to bring that out would be collaborative classrooms, and you really need technology-enabled and collaborative learning environments. So our late director, Professor Lee Sing Kong, envisioned that every single one of our tutorial rooms must not look like traditional classrooms. Today, when you enter the National Institute of Education, these are the tutorial rooms that you will see. All our 69 tutorial rooms look like this. You have plasma television sets, which are at once located either to the small table nearest to them, but it can also be linked to the central console of the teacher or the instructor. What you will also notice, maybe it's a little bit far away, right in the center, firstly, movable furniture. So it's easy for you to reconfigure your classroom in any way you want. If you open the flap of the hexagonal table, you will find power points that people need in order to plug in their 21st century devices. The other thing that is very noticeable is that it really employs the idea that the teacher is no longer the sage on stage, but the guide on the side, because literally, you can't see where the teacher is standing right here. And very often, if I were to walk into a classroom like this, I cannot find where the teacher is, because the teacher is typically walking around, enabling small group discussions and facilitating this in little groups. So every single one of our tutorial rooms had to move. So if you really want faculty to come on board, you do need to transform the physical infrastructure such that it doesn't look like traditional classrooms. We still do keep some of the traditional lecture theatres. However, they are no longer tutorial rooms where all desks are facing the front. Okay, I'm now going to highlight how, in terms of delivery in our programs, how some of the bigger components fits into this Teaching Scholars program that we introduced only in July 2014. We have graduated our first batch of students. We really do believe in the highest quality of teachers coming into the profession. It's a 4-year degree program. Our mainstay, by the way, is still the 16-month postgraduate diploma in education program. For that, I have just welcomed 552 student teachers. Now, this is a very small and niche program of about 70 to 80 scholars a year, not for lack of applicants. We typically have about 2,000 to 3,000 applicants every single year. But here, we've tried to bring all the ideas and learnings that we have gathered from around the world into one dream program, and really worked very hard with the Ministry of Education to fund this program because it is very expensive if you want to provide our student teachers with the multiple perspectives. So I'm going to cover each and every one of these components about learning beyond the classroom, how we provide very strong research opportunities, personalized learning, and so on and so forth. If I'm not wrong, I will start with personalized learning. So, very much like the Oxbridge model that I've seen, it is about one-to-one mentoring with your professor in your primary discipline. So I, for one, you'll see my little student teachers in the next slide. I make it a point to say at least one student teacher in my field, which is linguistics, every single year. And what happens is that I am the academic mentor for this student teacher, and it is my job to really advise the student teacher as they journey with us, but also to provide ample and sufficient and maximal opportunities to present their work, to help them in their professional journeys, both as researchers as well as practitioners. So this is very interesting, and what happens is I, out of my own device, would come up with something like this. I will talk to them in a very structured way if they come to see me. Describe how you feel about your academic progress at the moment. What are some positive attributes about the program? But do you also have suggestions for our improvement? And what can NIE further do to enhance your experience? Do you have any other suggestions? And because they're young, they're bright, they're bold, and courageous, I would hear some of the most critical but constructive comments from the student teachers that have helped me very much to grow that program. Currently, as Dean of the program, I may not have the luxury because a lot of people don't tell you the truth anymore, but I do have a Dean's tea every single semester with all the separate years across the 4 years, so they don't feel like they're speaking to me individually, but as a cohort of year 1s, year 2s, year 3s, and year 4s. So I'm going to show you, later on you'll see that picture when we talk about the research component. So in terms of innovative pedagogies, I think this is really just a sampler because we've heard from our first distinguished speaker about how commerce linguistics has moved so much, primarily because he's also commerce medicine working at it. So I would like to say that what is innovative today may no longer be innovative tomorrow. But here's some examples that we use. Okay, I think we do believe in experiential learning. We do believe in technology-enabled learning, but at the heart of everything that we do is that pedagogy must drive technology and not the other way around. So we do believe also in inquiry-based approaches. Our science classrooms, our professional portfolio, teaching and learning portfolio is all about inquiry-based learning. We also believe in scaffolding for self-directed learning. So when you develop apps, for example, it's not just about throwing the app to our student teachers, but demonstrating the technological affordances and learning experiences of a particular app to our student teachers. I think that is very important. In my own class, when I used to have the luxury of being able to teach, I would have one assignment where student teachers would serve the web for freely available pronunciation software, and they will critique it. They will tell me one that they would recommend and why, and another one they would not recommend and why. Because I realized that in the 21st century, with the proliferation of all sorts of free software out there, they need to be very, very discretionary, and they need to be able to make out what's good and what's not good for themselves as well as their learners. So these will be just some examples. I don't really have to go through every single one of them. But about broadening perspectives, we have 2 research projects for our student teachers. One is known as the undergraduate research experience on campus. It plays on the word Eureka, but this would really be a preparation for the very brightest who would want to go on to have a research career in the university. And for that reason, the cutoff is very high. The cumulative grade point average almost has to equate that of a first class honors or a summa cum laude if you're looking at the American system. They also have a second research project known as an Education Action Research Project, where they do need to research about a problem of practice that they find in their classrooms and how they would suggest perhaps interventions that they can enact. And we then encourage and give them funding to present at international conferences such as this. And they also have to undertake the project with their research mentors, which is typically, of course, a professor in the field. This is not very much unlike the academic honors thesis that all of us are familiar with. The only thing that you need to note is that we added a second component, which is the educational research project on top of it. So the teaching scholars graduate with 2 dissertations, if you like, not just one. It's very, very heavy. Okay, these are the student teachers. That is what we call lohe. Malaysia and Singapore are still quarreling about who created the lohe, which is basically the tossing of the raw fish and salad for good luck during Chinese New Year. So these are my student teachers, one from each year. And what I like to do is that I do also, apart from one-on-one mentoring, I like to have group mentoring sessions because the seniors will do all the work and they will tell you, don't do this, don't do that, this is my experience. And I think there is a lot to be spoken about peer mentoring. What you see on the left, with full permission from my student teacher, Amanda Sarah Chin, who is now in her final semester, is an example of a Eureka project entitled An Acoustic Analysis of Pronunciation Patterns of Low Progress Learners and Targeted Pronunciation Instruction. This is an example of a Eureka education research project. So at the end of it, they produce a very lovely poster, which they do display, and they can do this locally, but also at international conferences. So you can see that it already builds the teacher as researcher concept, even whilst they're with us in pre-service. In terms of broadening perspective, I talked about service learning. I would also like to tell you about BUILD, which stands for Building University Interns for Leadership Development. I have 84 local partner organizations, and I'm in the process of growing it. Many of these are outside the field of education. So our student teachers, for example, get to work not just in the Science Center, the Singapore Botanic Gardens, they get to work in other industries, even Ritz-Carlton Singapore. The reason being that I would like them to be exposed. If they are going to bring the world into their classroom, they cannot just have educational classroom experiences. They do need to be exposed. And this is a formal component known as BUILD. 84 partners and still growing, and I actively look for these partners. The National History Museum, the National Heritage Board, the Singapore Press Holdings, they have all sorts of opportunities to work in different industries, not necessarily related to education. Of course, they do have education organizations, like the main Ministry of Education headquarters, and when I interviewed my student teachers, they told me, do keep some of this because it does help us to build the professional partnerships that we need for the future as well. So whilst I try to expose them to external organizations beyond education, I do see the merit in retaining some of the experiences with educationally related partner organizations. The third thing I want to talk about is residential learning. Our student teachers in the Premier Scholars Program live in 2 halls known as Pioneer and Crescent Halls, and we enact residential programs for them that can grow them. It could even be a culinary class, it could be a class about professionalism and conduct, etc. But the idea is to mirror the residential learning experience that some universities, especially in the States, are practicing. So even whilst they are, and then they offer it as a general elective, which is credited as a pass or fail component in their overall program. So I talked about BUILD. This is working with Bollywood Veggies, which is really an organic vegetable farm. Okay, look at that. In the real world, it is never as simple as following guidelines or manuals, right? So, Other ways of multiple perspectives would be my international practicum and semester exchange programs, which I have enacted since 2014 with the help of my predecessor, and I'm growing it. We have 20 partner universities across 12 countries in 4 different continents. What happens is that my student teachers get to spend 5 weeks of teaching assistantship in these foreign classrooms. Again, the idea is to expose them beyond the very, very small context of the 366 schools in Singapore. It becomes even more urgent for us. My parent university, Nanyang Technological University, at first targeted a 60% overseas experience for their undergraduates. Today, that number is supposed to go to 80 or 90%. Okay, I believe that I can reach there, but there are in a Dean's Forum that I'll be participating in Hong Kong, we are going to be talking about the challenges of enacting international exchanges. So hopefully, it's not all that simple, because sometimes it is the case where your students may want to go more to that university than the other partner university coming over, and so on and so forth. Certain countries like the US, Canada have also very strict regulations about who can stand in front of the classroom to teach. So these are just some example challenges that we face. But we are still growing, and I talked about this. These are our main partners in different parts of the world. Okay, I already mentioned this, that we deliberately pay for, the ministry pays for residential accommodation for our scholars, so that even whilst they're in Singapore, they get to experience what hall living is like away from home. So it becomes a very holistic experience. When they graduate, I form a TSP alumni club. The idea is that I would like them to be very proud of identifying with the NIE Singapore, and not only feel proud, but really I would like to have a lifelong connection with them. And I'm planning, because my office doesn't just do pre-service teacher education, we also prepare teachers along the teaching track, known as a teacher leaders program, for milestone promotions to senior teachers and lead teachers. I'm going to start giving awards for such professional teachers as well, in the hope that they can grow the next fraternity of teachers. And likewise, we start them young. When they've graduated from the Teaching Scholars Program on a high, I really want them to keep in close contact with us to benefit future generations of teaching scholars, to make the program even more unique. And for the very, very, very bright overachievers, if doing 2 dissertations is not enough, they can even start master's level programs. I have to be very honest to admit that no one has done that, because they do realize that it is a good opportunity, but if you start your master's program at night, whilst you have a full program in the daytime, you might endanger your cumulative grade point average. It's a truth, right? Because you only have so many hours in the day. But what is extremely good is that the ministry has promised that any of them who graduate with first class honours or highest distinction are given a chance to go for an interview where they can pursue a master's degree, tenable locally or abroad. So they don't have to start it with us if they feel that it's too strenuous. Okay, my last part then, I've spent about 35 minutes, I've got another 10 minutes, which is just right. A case study of an English language teacher education in Singapore. How does this all come together when you prepare the English language teacher in Singapore? To begin with, our context is, if you know the sociolinguistic Cartruvian model of the inner, outer and expanding circles of English, we belong to the outer circle, where, generally, English is used as a second language, and where evidence has shown, even from my own research about pronunciation, that we are developing our own norms. Neither British nor American, but truly developing our own norms. So what do we do in such a context of ELT, teacher education in Singapore? First of all, we do believe in a very deep subject matter knowledge, and by this, I do mean the following aspects. I had published this in a publication in 2014 on language teacher education in Singapore, where I did a meta-analysis of the curriculum that we offer our student teachers in the English language program. So we do believe that when it comes to communicative competence, we are looking at sociolinguistic competence, strategic competence, grammatical linguistic competence as we traditionally know it, but also discourse competence. And then we also believe in giving Our student teaches school-relevant subject matter knowledge, so you have to be very in touch with the curriculum that's being offered in schools. And the last part is pedagogically relevant applied linguistics. So again, this is my summary slide, and I'll go into each of these in a little bit of detail, or at least give an example of each of these. So what does pedagogically relevant applied linguistics mean? It refers to those courses that build the awareness of aspects of linguistics that are directly relevant to the context of the language classroom within which they will be teaching. Examples of courses like this would be assessment literacy in the language classroom, technologically enabled learning in the language classroom, as well as disciplinary literacy. What do we mean by disciplinary literacy? It's a little bit like, I guess, I suppose it's a reiteration or reassertion of the ESP framework, but disciplinary literacy means that, for example, since 1987, English has been used as a medium of instruction for all schools in Singapore. So this means that even if you are not an English teacher, you will have to teach using English. So there is discipline-specific relevant English, for example, for the teaching of mathematics, for the teaching of science, for example. So we do have to cover each of these in our language modules as well. And when we talk about school-relevant subject matter, you really don't want, and this is a real example, when I was a young assistant dean following my dean around 10 years ago, we went into a primary school where they were having a meeting of principals, and one of the principals scolded us, and as you know, when anything goes wrong, blame pre-service. So I've also become a very, very cushioned dartboard from the Singapore schools, but it's okay, I take it with a pinch of salt. But I remember that 10 years ago, someone, a very irate principal said that, you know, your teachers don't even know what a compound word is. I said, yeah, I taught them that's two full words. Yeah, you know what they said are two full words? Mango, because it's made out of man plus go. So we do not take this feedback lightly, and we realize that it is extremely important for us to reteach grammar, traditional grammar, to our teachers in schools. Because even for me, I went through the communicative language teaching approach, where frankly I learned about verbs and nouns, etc., only when I took linguistics as an undergraduate in schools. And luckily, in tandem with the Ministry of Education, they retrained, since the year 2000, 8,000 English teachers in traditional grammar classes, okay, for 60 hours. And if you prove that you're good, it would reduce to 24 hours. But it was true that we had a whole cadre of teachers who did not know what a verb or a noun is because it wasn't explicitly taught to them. So today, we really do teach our students, okay, text types, which is very much a genre-based approach in our current syllabus, although we have just unveiled a new syllabus for 2020. And they also explore grammatical structures in children's literature. They also learn what we call pedagogical grammar, right? And all the latest initiatives, at the bottom you would see the website from the Ministry of Education's initiative. They will look at how to be able to cover the latest English language syllabi, curriculum goals, and initiatives into their classrooms as well. And currently, as I was sharing with you, two new initiatives, which are not even in my slides, because we are just in the process of implementing it, is how does the Singapore Teaching Practice, or STP, pan out in the English classroom? Number two, how does the Student Learning Space, which is a very sophisticated online digital platform, how is that realized in the language classrooms? So we are in the process of working with faculty to incorporate that as well. In terms of pedagogical knowledge, two main things. Really, it's about imparting knowledge about how to teach English in a group of courses known as curriculum studies. So curriculum studies is about how to teach that particular subject. And it is also, as I mentioned before, imparting knowledge of the latest syllabi goals for the subject. Okay? But there is also the knowledge of context or professional preparation. For this, we have a few courses. Communication skills for teachers is meant for all our student teachers, and we've also recently introduced in our 16-month enhanced postgraduate program something known as practical pronunciation for teachers, basic phonetics for teachers. which really we found over the years was quite lacking. Next, we have this certificate in English Language Studies precisely to teach content knowledge to those who are not English majors, but who will have to teach using English as the medium of instruction. And finally, of course, to tie everything together, I like to see our practicum as the glue or the backbone of the whole pre-service model. There is extreme emphasis on the practicum component and how it shows that you are able to demonstrate your proficiencies and competencies that you have learned at pre-service. Okay. Beyond teacher education at the pre-service level, Singapore is one of the rare systems which has devised 3 teaching tracks for our teachers. Teaching track, leadership track, as well as the specialist track. So what it means is that as you advance in your career as a professional teacher, you don't always have to be in the classroom. You can, according to your passion and your competence, be developed along one of these 3 career tracks. I've seen this in one other jurisdiction, Ontario, Canada. So it is something that is very interesting, and as I mentioned before, my office doesn't just take care of pre-service teacher education. I'm also in charge of enacting the Teacher Leaders Program, which is a milestone leadership program necessary for those wanting to be promoted along the teaching track. Okay? And finally, many people ask us, how do you know that what you do has impact? That the stakeholders, for example, the Ministry of Education and the 366 schools out there know that you're preparing the right teachers. Well, we do this very intentionally. First of all, I've mentioned about input. At the admissions level, we are very, very strict and very, very stringent in who we choose to enter into the profession. Whilst they are with us, we are also very strict in terms of measuring the quality of their experience. So my previous portfolio as Chief Planning Officer, as well as Head of Strategic Planning and Academic Quality, I did have to design very sophisticated quantitative and qualitative surveys that measure teacher professional competencies and development of identities as they walk through our pre-service program through the program evaluation. But that's not all, because a lot of people will say that's self-reporting. So the final element, which is the test of our products, which is that the school leaders or stakeholders fill out a survey of reflecting on the beginning teachers that they have just inherited in their schools. And this is done for every single cohort. It used to be done once in 5 years and once in 3 years, and now the ministry wants to do it every single year. As I was doing academic quality and researching on teacher education, I found it fun. But now, as I'm the Dean of Teacher Education, I find it very stressful. So that's the reality, but I take it in a positive spirit that to me, it is about providing an evidence-based platform from which I can improve the quality of my programs. And in order to do this well, I do need to hear from the horse's mouth through both quantitative and qualitative surveys and focus group discussions so that they can help inform us about what we need to do as a fraternity. So many people have asked me to reflect on the Singapore story. And so this is something that over the years I've thought very, very deep and very, very hard about it. And to me, as a teacher educator, a language teacher educator, it is really about judicious policy making that is evidence informed, but the key to all of this is fidelity in implementation through extreme systemic coherence. So to be very, very honest with all of you, Singapore has really, really humbly learned from all of your systems. The only thing that we're very good at is enacting those and being very strict, and we have extreme fidelity in the implementation, and we are able to do this through the systemic coherence, which is the Ministry of Education, all the schools out there, together with only one teacher preparation institute working in tandem in a tripartite relationship. And to tie all of this together, I realize I've spoken for just 45 minutes, which would have taken me from, I guess, London to Cambridge. Oops, sorry, wrong one. I would like to play you a video now to summarize everything.
the NIE Singapore introduced our teacher education for the 21st century model, where we believe in a very values-driven, student-centric paradigm, both in education as well as teacher education. We took bold steps to move our teacher education in tandem with preparing our students for the future. We should not let technology drive pedagogy, but instead, pedagogy should be enhanced by technological affordances. What happened was, as a pronunciation specialist, I realized that there were a lot of software out there, but they're not by local models of standard English. They are British models, American models, for example, but we could not find a single standard Singapore English model. Therefore, together with my colleagues from the English Language and Literature Department, we decided to develop our own Penguin Odyssey, and it introduces students to the International Phonetic Alphabet through 5 stages of games. And the whole idea is that before they play the game, they get to learn phonetics as well. Recently, Singapore has enjoyed a lot of international media publicity because of our top performance in the PISA 2015 study conducted by the OECD. Many international partners have come to ask us, what is it that counts for the success story of Singapore? My own reflection is that it is about judicious policy making that is evidence-informed and fidelity in implementation of these policies through extreme systemic coherence. The first and most important thing is attracting the best and the brightest of Singapore's cohort into teaching. Today, we are looking at not just the top 30% that make it into higher education into Singapore that enter into teaching, but we also have a very prestigious Teaching Scholars Program that truly attracts the best and the brightest who are able to go to the best universities in the world, but who have selected teaching as their calling. Secondly, it is also about providing a very competitive compensation package for teachers so that it is comparable to other professions in the civil service. We are one of the few systems that have developed 3 career tracks for our teachers: the teaching track, the leadership track, as well as the specialist track. In developing these 3 tracks, we are telling the teacher that with us, you can be developed to realize your career aspirations and goals. Because if you are good at teaching, you can be on the teaching track. If you are good at leading, you can be a school leader. And finally, if you are good in terms of a very deep understanding of discipline, then you can be on the specialist track. In Singapore, we have a very tight tripartite partnership between the Ministry of Education that makes evidence-informed policies that can be translated into teacher education programs, which is then turned into pedagogical practice in our schools. In such a way, the close tripartite partnership between the Ministry of Education, the National Institute of Education, Singapore, as well as all schools out there, you will find that we have a very systemic coherence in our education system, leading further to our success. Finally, I'd like to say that for any successful education system, it is about learning from the best in the world. The answers do not lie in Singapore, and therefore we are very willing to go out there to learn from the best practices from around the world and implement them in a contextualized fashion for Singapore's context. In 5 years' time, where would I like to see NIE Singapore? I do not see any reason why we can't be the best in the world in terms of providing teacher education. And even if we cannot be the top in the world, I would like to see us certainly as a top in Asia. That people come to us because we excel in teacher education and educational research, and that we prepare students who are future ready, able to face the future and able to create solutions for the future.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very, very much for your kind attention and for indulging me in allowing me to present to you before lunch. But one final slide, which is that I am the co-chair of the 20th English in Southeast Asia Conference. It will be the 20th year. Our partner in Thailand is KMUTT, and we will be organizing it outside of the university at the Raffles Town Club, since it's a very special occasion, but we only have 200 places. It will take place a year from now on the 6th and the 7th of December. So I hope to be able to welcome you to Singapore, and thank you very much For listening to me, remember that teaching is the human endeavor of paying it forward. Thank you very much for your partnership.
I wonder if we haven't just heard from the Minister of Education in Singapore. And as well, may I ask you to acknowledge our appreciation